The ground beneath Dr. Riven Solis's boots crunched with volcanic ash as he surveyed the devastation. Smoke still curled from the blackened crater where the poacher's ship had crash-landed 3 days ago. The Ravager attack had been swift and merciless, twisted metal scattered across the rocky terrain like broken bones, testimony to the fury of Varella's apex predators. His patrol team had wanted to leave immediately after confirming no survivors. Standard protocol. The volcanic wildlands were no place for humans, especially with Ravager packs still hunting in the area. But something had caught Riven's attention, a sound that didn't belong among the settling debris and hissing thermal vents. A whimper. Weak, desperate, barely audible above the wind. "Sir, we need to evacuate," Sergeant Torres called from behind him, her voice tight with anxiety. The thermal readings show at least 3 adult Ravagers within a kilometer radius. Riven held up his hand for silence, following the sound deeper into the crater. There, wedged between 2 chunks of twisted hull plating, he found them. 3 Ravager cubs, no bigger than earth wolves, their bioluminescent stripes flickering weakly like dying stars. Their midnight black fur was matted with blood, and their breathing came in shallow, ragged gasps. The largest cub lifted its head at his approach, golden eyes meeting his. Instead of the snarl he expected, it let out a pitiful mewl, the sound of a child calling for its mother. "My God," whispered Dr. Elena Vasquez, the team's xenobiologist, as she approached cautiously. "They are just babies. They can't be more than a few weeks old." "Doesn't matter," Torres said firmly. "Adult Ravagers killed 18 miners last month. These things grow up to be 8-foot killing machines with claws that can slice through steel." We need to help them," Riven interrupted, already kneeling beside the cubs. The largest one didn't flinch as he extended his hand. "Palm up." Its tiny nose twitched, catching his scent. Torres stepped forward, hand moving to her sidearm. "Sir, with respect, you're putting the entire team at risk. Ravagers are known to track their young across continents. The parents will come looking. Then they'll find their cubs alive instead of dead." Riven's voice carried the weight of command he'd earned during his military years. "Set up a perimeter 200 meters out. Send the others back to base camp. Dr. Vasquez and I will stay." "I didn't sign up to be Ravager food," Torres protested. "That's an order, Sergeant." As his team reluctantly withdrew, Riven began assessing the cub's injuries. The smallest had a deep gash along its flank, likely from debris during the crash. The middle cub's front leg was bent at an unnatural angle, probably broken. But it was their eyes that struck him most, not the wild, predatory gaze he'd expected, but something achingly familiar. Fear. Confusion. The universal look of children separated from their parents. Dr. Vasquez unpacked her medical kit with practiced efficiency. "This is insane, Riven. Even if we save them, what then? We can't exactly take baby Ravagers back to the research station. We'll figure that out later." He gently lifted the injured cub, surprised by how light it felt. Its body trembled against his chest, but it didn't struggle. Right now, they need help. As the sun began to set behind the jagged volcanic peaks, painting the sky in shades of amber and crimson, Riven worked by the light of his portable beacon. He cleaned wounds, set the broken leg with a makeshift splint, and used emergency ration paste to feed the weakest cub. Each small victory, a wound cleaned, a whimper quieted, felt monumental. The night brought new sounds. Distant roars echoed across the crater rim, deep and resonant enough to make the ground vibrate. Somewhere out there, adult ravagers were searching. Dr. Vasquez huddled closer to their small camp, her scanner beeping softly as it tracked movement in the darkness. 3 large signatures moving in a search pattern, she whispered. They are getting closer. Riven nodded, continuing to tend the cubs. The largest one had managed to drink some water and was now resting against his leg, its breathing steadier. Trust, he realized. Despite everything, despite humanity's reputation as invaders and exploiters, this creature trusted him. The roars grew closer, and with them came the sound he'd been dreading, the scrape of massive claws against stone. A Ravager matriarch had found their trail. Dawn broke cold and grey over the crater, mist rising from the thermal vents like ghostly fingers. Riven hadn't slept. He'd spent the night keeping watch, one hand resting protectively on the sleeping cubs while the other gripped his emergency beacon, not to call for rescue, but to broadcast a simple message on all frequencies: peaceful intent. No weapons. Protecting young. Dr. Vasquez stirred from her restless sleep as a sound split the morning air, a roar so primal and powerful that loose rocks tumbled down the crater walls. It came from directly above them, at the crater's rim. She's here, Vasquez breathed. Her face pale in the dawn light, the Ravager matriarch descended into the crater with fluid grace despite her massive size. Standing nearly 9 feet tall at the shoulder, her obsidian fur rippled with bioluminescent stripes that pulsed with aggressive red light. Her golden eyes, each the size of dinner plates, fixed on the human camp with predatory intensity. Curved horns jutted from her skull like ancient war spears, and her claws, each longer than Riven's forearm, carved furrows in the rocky ground with every step. This was death incarnate, evolution's perfect killing machine. And she was searching for her children. The cubs stirred at their mother's scent, the largest managing to lift its head with a weak chirp. The matriarch's stride faltered. Her blazing eyes swept the camp, taking in the medical supplies, the carefully tended wounds, the makeshift shelter that had protected her young through the night. Riven rose slowly, hands visible and empty. Easy. Mother, he said softly, though he knew she couldn't understand his words. They are safe. Your babies are safe. The matriarch's roar shook the crater, a sound of pure maternal fury that spoke of every protective instinct honed by millions of years of evolution. Her lips pulled back to reveal teeth like ivory daggers. Every muscle in her powerful frame coiled for the strike that would end this intrusion, but she didn't attack. Instead, she approached her cubs with surprising gentleness, her massive head lowering to nuzzle each one. The largest cub managed to struggle to its feet, pressing against its mother's snout with obvious relief. The middle cub, still favoring its splintered leg, chirped softly as she examined the human medical work. For a long moment, predator and protector stared at each other across the divide of species and survival. Riven could smell her scent, wild, musky, tinged with the copper of recent kills. Her breathing was deep and controlled, each exhale a visible puff in the cold morning air. Dr. Vasquez remained frozen behind their supply cache, hardly daring to breathe. This was the moment that would determine everything: live or die, trust or terror. The matriarch took a step toward Riven. Then another. Her claws scraped against stone with each movement, a sound like swords being drawn. When she was close enough that her breath ruffled his hair, she stopped. Riven met her gaze without flinching. In those ancient golden eyes, he saw not just intelligence but judgment. She was measuring him, weighing his actions against his intentions. This creature had lived long enough in these hostile lands to become an apex predator. She understood the difference between threat and protection. Slowly, deliberately, she lowered her massive head until it was level with his. Her nostrils flared as she took his scent, memorizing it. This close, Riven could see the battle scars that marked her hide, the wisdom etched in the patterns around her eyes. She had fought humans before, knew their capacity for both creation and destruction, but she had never encountered one who stayed to heal rather than flee or fight. With infinite care, she touched her nose to his outstretched palm. The contact lasted only seconds, but it burned like a brand, the first peaceful touch between human and Ravager in the history of two species. Then she pulled back, gathered her cubs with gentle nudges, and began the slow journey out of the crater. The largest cub looked back once, its golden eyes meeting Riven's in what might have been recognition, or gratitude, or simply goodbye. As the matriarch reached the crater rim, she paused. Her roar echoed across the volcanic landscape, but this time, the sound was different. Not rage or challenge, but something else entirely. A call that would be heard and understood by every Ravager pack within 50 kilometers. The human had protected the young. The human could be trusted. Word of the crater incident spread through the Ravager packs like wildfire, carried on the complex harmonics of their long-distance calls. Dr. Marina Okafor, the xenolinguist recently assigned to Varela Station, spent sleepless nights analyzing the recordings, trying to decode what the creatures were telling each other. It's unprecedented, she explained to Riven during his debriefing 2 weeks later. The vocalizations have completely changed. Where we used to record aggressive territorial markers and threat displays, now we're hearing what can only be described as recommendations. Riven sat in the station's observation deck, watching the volcanic landscape through reinforced viewports. Since returning from the crater, he'd found it difficult to focus on routine research duties. His thoughts kept drifting to 3 small faces and a moment of trust that had changed everything. Recommendations, he asked. Pack leaders sharing information about safe passage routes, warning calls about genuine threats versus neutral parties. They are teaching each other to distinguish between different types of humans. Dr. Okafor pulled up her analysis on the main screen. Listen to this. The recording filled the room with deep, resonant sounds, part raw, part song. To untrained ears, it might have seemed like meaningless animal noise. But Riven had spent enough time in the wild to recognize patterns, rhythms that suggested complex communication. That's the matriarch, he said with certainty. Exactly. And she's not just calling to her own pack. This is being broadcast across multiple territories, creating a communication network we never knew existed. They are sharing the story of what you did. The implications were staggering. For decades, human expansion into Ravager territory had been met with consistent, coordinated resistance. Settlements abandoned, mining operations destroyed, research teams attacked without warning. The assumption had always been that Ravagers were purely instinct-driven predators, incapable of the complex social structures that might allow for coexistence. They had been wrong. 3 days later, the first test came. A supply convoy bound for the northern mining outpost reported Ravager sightings along the mountain pass, traditionally a death sentence for any human expedition. But instead of attacks, they encountered something extraordinary. You need to see this, convoy leader Hayes said, his voice crackling over the comm as he transmitted video feedback to the station. The footage showed 6 adult Ravagers positioned along the pass, their bioluminescent stripes pulsing in synchronized patterns. As the convoy approached, the creatures moved aside, not fleeing, but deliberately clearing the path. One massive male even stood watch on an overlooking ridge, his attention focused outward on potential threats rather than on the human vehicles. Passing below. "They are escorting us," Hayes whispered in amazement. "I've never seen anything like it." But the most remarkable encounter came when Dr. Sarah Chen, a wildlife veterinarian, was called to investigate reports of injured animals near the eastern thermal fields. What she found challenged everything the scientific community thought they knew about ravager behavior. A female ravager waited at the edge of the field, standing protectively over a cub that had clearly been burned by volcanic gases. The mother's eyes tracked Chen's approach but showed none of the aggressive posturing typically associated with defending young. Instead, she stepped back as Chen approached, allowing access to her injured offspring. "She's asking for help," Chen reported via comm, her voice filled with wonder. "A wild predator is voluntarily bringing her baby to a human for medical treatment." The cub's injuries were severe but treatable. As Chen worked, applying burn salve and administering pain medication, the mother watched intently. Her golden eyes followed every movement, cataloging techniques and procedures. When Chen demonstrated how to apply fresh bandages, the ravager's head tilted with unmistakable intelligence. Later, as Chen packed her equipment, the mother approached with something in her jaws, a rare crystalline formation found only in the deepest volcanic caves, worth a fortune to collectors. She dropped it at Chen's feet, then nuzzled her cub gently before leading it away into the wilderness. Payment. Gratitude. Recognition of debt. These interactions multiplied across the planet's surface. Mining teams reported ravagers warning them away from unstable areas with specific vocalizations. Research expeditions found themselves guided toward safer camping sites by creatures that had once been their greatest threat. Most remarkably, injured ravagers began appearing at the edges of human settlements, seeking the healing that had saved 3 cubs in a crater, but perhaps the most significant change was in the cubs themselves. The generation born after the crater incident showed markedly different behavior toward humans. They were curious rather than aggressive, playful rather than predatory. Some even began following human patrols at a distance, learning by observation. The largest of the 3 original cubs, the one who had first met Riven's gaze, grew into a magnificent specimen that the research team nicknamed a Scout. Unlike other ravagers, Scout would approach human camps openly, his bioluminescent stripes pulsing in greeting patterns that seemed almost friendly. One evening, as Riven sat by his field station reviewing data, Scout emerged from the shadows and settled nearby. The massive predator, now nearly full-grown, positioned himself like a guardian, facing outward toward the wilderness. For the first time since the crater, Riven felt something he hadn't expected, a sense of being protected rather than being. The protector, trust, once given, had become partnership. 6 months after the crater incident, Varela Station faced its greatest crisis. Long-range sensors detected an approaching fleet of poacher vessels, the same criminal organization that had been decimated by ravagers months earlier, now returning with heavily armed ships and military-grade equipment. Commander Patricia Webb gathered her senior staff in the crisis center as warning sirens echoed through the corridors. "Intelligence suggests they are here for revenge," she announced grimly. Their previous expedition was worth millions in exotic specimens and bioluminescent organs. "They blame us for the security breach that led to their losses." Security breach? Dr. Vasquez looked confused. "We had nothing to do with their crash." "No, but our presence here legitimizes human claims to this territory." If they can eliminate the research station and pin it on Ravager attacks, they'll have free rein to strip mine the entire bioluminescent ecosystem. Riven studied the tactical display showing enemy ship positions. 8 vessels, each bristling with weapons designed to penetrate Ravager hide and disable their bioelectric systems. These weren't explorers or even typical poachers, they were exterminators. We need to evacuate, Webb continued. Full withdrawal within 12 hours. Everything not essential gets left behind. What about the Ravagers? Dr. Chen interjected. If these poachers deploy electromagnetic pulse weapons across the territory, it'll disrupt their entire neural network. The cubs especially won't survive. That kind of interference. That's not our primary concern, it should be. Riven's voice cut through the debate with quiet authority. Those creatures trusted us. They changed their entire social structure based on one act of protection. If we abandon them now, you're suggesting we fight a private military force to protect alien predators? Webb's tone was incredulous. I'm suggesting we honor the alliance we created. The argument might have continued, but it was interrupted by an emergency alert from the perimeter sensors. Scout had appeared at the station's main gate, accompanied by something unprecedented, a full pack of adult Ravagers, including the matriarch herself. Through the reinforced viewports, the station staff watched in amazement as nearly 30 massive predators arranged themselves in defensive positions around the human facility. Their bioluminescent stripes pulsed in synchronized patterns that Dr. Okafor quickly identified as strategic communications. They know, she breathed. Somehow, they know about the approaching threat. The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Hendricks, the atmospheric specialist, had been monitoring electromagnetic signatures when he noticed unusual patterns in the planet's natural energy field. The Ravagers aren't just bioluminescent, he realized. They are bioelectric. They can sense electromagnetic disturbances across vast distances. Those poacher ships lit up their sensory network the moment they entered the system. Scout approached the main airlock, his massive frame clearly visible through the transparent aluminum barrier. His golden eyes found Riven through the barrier, and the message was unmistakable. We stand together. Commander Webb faced an impossible decision. Standard protocol demanded evacuation and minimal engagement with hostile forces. But the sight of 30 apex predators voluntarily defending a human installation challenged every assumption about interspecies relations. Sir, Lieutenant Torres spoke up from her communication station. I'm receiving tactical data from the Ravager positions. They are sharing intelligence about poacher weapons and vehicle vulnerabilities. How is that possible? Scout is at the main terminal, Dr. Chen reported from the observation deck. He's interfacing with our computer systems somehow. His bioelectric field is compatible with our electronics. The implications were staggering. The Ravagers hadn't just learned to trust humans, they had learned to communicate with human technology. Years of observing research operations had taught them to interact with sensors, computers, and communication. Arrays.as The first poacher dropships entered the atmosphere, the true extent of the alliance became clear. Ravager packs across the continent began coordinating their movements, creating a defensive network that stretched from the polar ice caps to the equatorial volcanoes. They shared real-time intelligence about enemy positions, warned each other about electromagnetic pulse deployments and coordinated strike patterns with mathematical precision, the poachers expected to face scattered, instinct-driven animals. Instead, they encountered a unified force of intelligent predators led by creatures who had learned strategy and tactics from observing human military operations. The battle that followed became legendary in xenobiological circles. Ravagers used their natural stealth and speed to disable landing craft before crews could deploy their heaviest weapons. They demonstrated an understanding of electromagnetic pulse effects, positioning themselves to minimize damage while maximizing their counterattack effectiveness. But the most remarkable moment came when Scout, leading a pack of young adults, intercepted a poacher squad attempting to reach the station's power core. The humans inside watched through security cameras as the massive predator stood in the corridor, not attacking but simply blocking access. When the poachers raised their weapons, Scout's bioluminescent stripes flashed in a pattern that Dr. Okafor later translated as a simple message: "You will not pass." The poachers' electromagnetic pulse weapons, designed to incapacitate Ravagers, instead triggered something unexpected. Scout's bioelectric field resonated with the station's power grid, amplifying his natural abilities to unprecedented levels. His stripes blazed like miniature stars as he channeled the energy through his body and back into the station's systems, creating a feedback loop that overloaded the attacker's equipment. In less than 6 hours, the poacher fleet was in full retreat. Their advanced weapons had proven useless against creatures that had learned to turn technology into an extension of their natural abilities. More importantly, they had underestimated the power of trust between species. As the last enemy vessel disappeared beyond the orbital horizon, Scout returned to the station's main entrance. This time, the airlock cycled open. For the first time in human-Ravager relations, a member of the species walked freely inside a human facility. Riven met him in the main corridor, and Scout settled into a resting position that brought his massive head level with the humans. The Predator's eyes held something that transcended species barriers, the recognition of kinship forged in battle and sealed in mutual protection. The bond between human and Ravager was no longer just about trust. It had become something deeper, true partnership in defending the world they now shared. 2 years after the crater incident, Varela had become something unprecedented in human expansion history, a truly integrated colony where two apex species shared territory not through dominance, but through mutual cooperation. The changes were visible everywhere. Human settlements now featured bioelectric interfaces designed to accommodate Ravager communication, while Ravager dens incorporated human medical supplies and emergency shelters. Children of both species grew up together, learning each other's languages and customs. Dr. Amara Reeves, the colony's first interspecies relations coordinator, documented these developments in her landmark study, The Varela Accords, a new model for xenobiological integration. Her research station, built jointly by human engineers and Ravager architects, stood as a testament to what was possible when trust replaced fear. The key insight, she explained to visiting scientists from across the galaxy, was recognizing that intelligence takes many forms. Humans assumed that advanced tool use was the primary marker of civilization. Ravagers operated on bioelectric networks that made our most sophisticated communication systems look primitive. The morning demonstration always amazed visitors. In the station's central plaza, human children played alongside Ravager cubs in games that would have been impossible 2 years earlier. Young Ravagers had learned to modulate their bioluminescent displays to create complex light patterns, while human children developed an intuitive understanding of electromagnetic field communication. Scout, now the unofficial ambassador between species had mastered over 50 human languages through direct neural interface with the colony's computer systems. His ability to translate between bioelectric Ravager communication and human vocal patterns had revolutionized interspecies dialogue. The poacher attack was a turning point, Riven reflected during his final interview before retirement. It proved that trust isn't just about individual relationships, it's about choosing sides when everything is at stake. He stood on his favorite observation deck, watching the daily patrol that had become a symbol of the new Varela. Human rangers rode alongside Ravager scouts, their bioelectric fields synchronized for instant communication across vast distances. Where once there had been territorial boundaries marked by conflict, now there were cooperative zones where both species worked together to maintain the delicate volcanic ecosystem. The economic implications had been transformative. Ravager bioelectric abilities allowed for unprecedented mineral detection and geological surveying. Human medical technology had virtually eliminated cub mortality and extended adult Ravager lifespans by decades. Trade routes that had been impossible due to territorial conflicts now flourished under joint protection, but perhaps the most significant change was in the next generation. The first human-raised Ravager cub, orphaned in a thermal vent collapse, and adopted by Dr. Chen's family, had developed communication abilities that bridged both species naturally. Young Kayla could speak fluent Standard, manipulate human technology through bioelectric interface, and translate the complex harmonic languages of her birth species. Similarly, human children raised in integrated communities showed remarkable adaptations. They developed enhanced electromagnetic sensitivity, allowing them to perceive Ravager emotional states and communicate basic concepts through biofield manipulation. We are witnessing rapid evolutionary adaptation in real time, Dr. Vasquez noted. In her research, both species are changing in response to cooperative pressure rather than competitive pressure. It's unprecedented. The colony's success hadn't gone unnoticed by the broader galactic community. Diplomatic missions from 12 different species had visited Varela to study the integration model. The Centauri Collective had formally recognized the Varela Accords as a template for peaceful first contact protocols. On his final day as head of xenobiological relations, Riven walked the familiar path to the original crater where everything had begun. The site had been transformed into a memorial garden, not for the dead, but for the birth of something new. Bioluminescent plants cultivated by Ravager gardeners created living murals that told the story of trust overcoming fear. Scout waited for him there, as Riven had known he would. The massive predator had grown into something magnificent, his midnight fur now shot through with silver that marked him as an elder among his people, his bioluminescent stripes carrying the complex patterns that indicated his status as a bridge builder between worlds. "Old friend," Riven said softly, placing his hand on Scout's massive shoulder. "We've come a long way from 3 scared cubs in a crater." Scout's response came not in words but in the warm pulse of bioelectric energy that conveyed emotions beyond human language, gratitude, affection, and something deeper. The recognition that 2 beings from vastly different evolutionary paths had chosen to walk together toward an uncertain but hopeful future. As the sun set behind the volcanic peaks, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold, other figures joined them in the garden. Dr. Chen arrived with young Kayla, now nearly adult-sized and serving as a translator for visiting diplomatic missions. Dr. Vasquez brought her latest research on bioelectric communication. Commander Webb, her initial skepticism, long since replaced by admiration, came to pay her respects to the partnership that had transformed a colony into a new model for civilization, but it was the arrival of the newest generation that truly marked how far they had come. A mixed group of human and Ravager youth, their bioelectric fields naturally synchronized from years of growing up together, approached the memorial with easy familiarity. To them, interspecies cooperation wasn't a miraculous achievement, it was simply the world they had inherited. The largest of the young Ravagers, one of Scout's own offspring, approached Riven with the same curious trust his parent had shown years earlier. In the creature's golden eyes, Riven saw not just intelligence but something more precious, the assumption that humans and Ravagers naturally belonged together. As night fell and the bioluminescent displays of the memorial garden created a constellation of living light, Riven realized that the true victory hadn't been saving 3 cubs in a crater. It had been proving that trust, once freely given, could transform enemies into family and turn a hostile world into a home for everyone willing to protect rather than exploit.